What if I told you the snack sitting in your kitchen right now might be fueling one of the planet's biggest environmental crises? Behind its bright packaging and familiar taste lies a hidden system of factories, farms, and emissions so vast it rivals entire nations. The processed food industry is worth more than $2 trillion, yet most of its environmental footprint is invisible. Deforestation, plastic waste, and energy-hungry production lines, all quietly baked into the price of convenience. But here's the truth the industry doesn't want you to see. Because once you understand how these foods are made, transported, and sold, you'll realize the real cost isn't on the label, it's on the planet. We live in an age where food has never seemed cheaper, faster, or easier. A full meal ready in minutes, a chocolate bar for pocket change, a soda that costs less than bottled water. It feels like modern efficiency, but it's one of the greatest illusions of our time. Because while the price tag may look small, someone else is quietly paying the rest of the bill, the planet. Ultra-processed foods, the brightly wrapped snacks and ready meals that fill supermarket aisles, now make up more than half of global diets. Their low cost is built on an invisible subsidy: cheap oil, cheap crops, and cheap labor. Behind every bite lies an army of industrial farms, chemical refineries, and global shipping routes. Recent investigations exposed what those prices really hide: emissions, deforestation, and pollution on a scale that rivals some of the world's largest industries. The true cost of a single $1 snack could include forests cleared for soy, rivers polluted by fertilizer runoff, and factories powered by coal thousands of miles away. But the numbers don't lie. None of that shows up on the label. You see the calories, the sugar, the fat. You don't see the fossil fuels. Ultra-processed foods dominate today's basket. About 70% of supermarket products are UPFs. And in the US, they supply over half of all calories. Cheap at checkout because carbon, waste, and land use costs are kept off the books. This isn't cheap food, it's debt disguised as convenience. A system where corporations pocket the profit and the planet pays the interest. And if that sounds like exaggeration, wait until you see how far this deception really goes, because in the next truth, we'll pull back the curtain on a supply chain so complex, even the companies themselves admit they can't trace it. Every processed food on the shelf has a secret passport, one that crosses continents before it ever reaches your plate. Take something as simple as a chocolate bar. It looks harmless, ordinary, but behind that glossy wrapper is a global web of farms, factories, and freight routes that few companies can fully trace. Industry experts call it the black box of the food industry. Even the biggest brands admit they can't see where many of the raw ingredients truly come from. Palm oil from Indonesia, sugar from Brazil, dairy from Europe, cocoa from West Africa. Each one travels thousands of miles, leaving a trail of emissions, deforestation, and human exploitation along the way. By the time that chocolate bar hits the checkout, it's already carried the weight of a carbon footprint larger than the country it's sold in. And yet, not a single part of that story is written on the packaging. A single M&M-style chocolate shows the scale: about 34 ingredients from roughly 30 countries, with life cycle emissions, about 13.2 kilograms of CO2 per kilogram, adding up to millions of tons annually when scaled to US sales alone. No mention of the forests cleared for palm plantations, no trace of the fossil fuels burned to process and ship it, no clue about the labor conditions still tied to parts of the cocoa trade. Instead, we get cheerful slogans: sustainably sourced, ethically made, planet-friendly, labels that sound like transparency but are really designed to distract. Because the deeper you look into a processed food supply chain, the murkier it gets. Most companies rely on third-party suppliers, subcontractors, and unregulated brokers. Each adds a layer of distance between the consumer and the truth. By the time the final product is sealed, accountability has vanished completely. And the most disturbing part? This lack of transparency isn't a glitch, it's the business model. Because if you can't track the damage, you can't be held responsible for it. But what happens when scientists finally do try to measure it? That's where the story gets even darker. Quick note: If this kind of investigation matters to you, tap subscribe and share this with one person who buys these snacks. It helps us push stories like this into the light, and it tells the industry we're watching. When companies talk about cutting their carbon footprint, it sounds reassuring. Cleaner factories, greener packaging, electric delivery trucks. But what if I told you that most of those emission cuts barely scratch the surface? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Most food corporations only count the pollution they can see, the factories they own, the trucks they drive. What they leave out is everything that happens before the food even reaches them. Scientists call it Scope 3 emissions, the carbon created by growing, processing, and transporting ingredients. And in the processed food industry, Scope 3 makes up as much as 80 to 90% of total pollution. It's the hidden majority, invisible in annual reports, but catastrophic in reality. Research shows that some companies report less than a quarter of their true footprint. The rest, from the palm plantations to the soy farms, from the packaging chemicals to the fertilizer plants, disappear into accounting shadows. One researcher put it bluntly. Without Scope 3, you're not cutting emissions, you're outsourcing them. That's how the illusion is maintained, by claiming progress on the small parts they control while quietly shifting the bigger damage onto others: suppliers, farmers, consumers. It's environmental laundering, where pollution is hidden behind spreadsheets and responsibility evaporates across borders. Companies keep the profits, countries keep the pollution. But what if I told you that this imbalance doesn't stop at carbon? Because the deeper you go, the more you realize this isn't just an emissions crisis, it's an ethical one. And in the next truth, that inequality takes center stage. Processed food looks local when you pull it from a shelf. It isn't. It's stitched together across continents, a mosaic of cocoa, sugar, dairy, palm fats, corn, soy, dyes, and additives. Each piece extracted, refined, and shipped before it's reassembled into something bright and familiar. The supply web is staggering. A single candy can involve 30 countries before the final product is made. That's not a supply chain, that's a planetary circuit. And the costs don't fall evenly. Ingredients like cocoa, palm oil, and corn are tied to land-hungry agriculture and energy-intensive processing. Since 1850, agricultural expansion has driven almost 90% of global deforestation, responsible for roughly 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Those forests aren't being cleared where the snacks are eaten. They're cleared where raw materials are grown, in places with weaker protections and communities closest to the damage. Then, there are industrial additives that define ultra-processing. Even the colors can be carbon-heavy. Blue dyes used in popular chocolates are synthesized from petroleum-derived chemicals, concentrated in manufacturing hubs far from the point of sale. The chemistry is complex. The emissions are not. More energy, more inputs, more waste. This is how convenience becomes extraction. Corporations concentrate profit at the end of the chain: branding, marketing, retail, while pollution and land pressure concentrate at the beginning: farms, refineries, reactors. The people who benefit least from the product live with the most immediate environmental risk: flooding where forests once buffered rain, contaminated waterways downstream of fertilizer plants, and soils stripped bare by monocultures. Call it globalization, or call it what it is: a one-way transfer from ecosystems to balance sheets. And here's the part the industry won't print on the label: this divide persists because it's profitable. But if the damage is this dispersed, how do you even measure it, let alone make anyone pay? That's the fight in the final truth: what it would take to price the real cost and end the $2 trillion lie. If the $2 trillion food lie was built on convenience, deception, and silence, then the only way out begins with truth. But that truth isn't just about ingredients, it's about accountability. Right now, the people least responsible for the damage are the ones footing the bill. So what would it look like if processed food giants actually paid their share? It would mean carbon labels printed on every package, showing the true environmental footprint of every snack and ready meal. It would mean the polluter pays principle applied to food, just as it's applied to oil and energy. And it would mean transparency, real, verifiable data. not green slogans. Some governments are already pushing for change. In France, environmental impact labels have begun to appear on supermarket products. In the EU, new legislation is targeting misleading sustainability claims. And in the UK, scientists are urging regulators to include food systems in national carbon budgets. But the biggest shift won't come from policy alone. It will come from awareness. Every time a consumer understands the hidden cost behind a cheap product, the illusion weakens. Because industries can ignore science for a while, but they can't ignore demand forever. It's not just a climate issue, it's a moral one. We can't keep eating as if the world doesn't notice. And when you realize that every processed meal, every snack, every bite carries an invisible footprint, you start to see the system for what it really is. A machine built for profit. And one that can be dismantled. One choice, one reform, one truth at a time. The next time you unwrap a snack, remember this. The true ingredients were never just sugar, salt, or oil. They were forests, oceans, people, all ground down in the machinery of profit and convenience. We were told processed food made life easier, but easy was never the goal. Control was. Change doesn't start in boardrooms, it starts with awareness. Because once you understand the system, you can't unsee it. And when enough people stop playing along, even the biggest industries start to fall apart. The $2 trillion food lie still grows every time we look away, but the moment you see it, it starts to break. If this opened your eyes, share it. Because the only way to fight a hidden system is to drag it into the light. This isn't business as usual. This is the shadow market.